Today we're going to continue our conversation on Intro to SQL and talking a little bit about changing data. So today is going to be very demo heavy, and Brian's going to walk us through that. If you have questions, right, you're welcome to put it in the chat, or there is the Q&A tab there. You can put in the question there, and we'll make sure to get those answered. I guess a question, right? As we're getting started, as we introduce ourselves with a question, I'd like everyone to answer. Now, I know we had Thanksgiving last week, right? So you probably weren't thinking about databases last week, unless you were Brian or I. But I am curious to know if you have been able to. I'm gonna use the word do anything with T-SQL since the last time we talked. So if this is your first time, right, you're off the hook. But if you've been back, if you were here 2 weeks ago, have you been able to do anything with it? Right. So let me know. Yes, no, maybe so. Let me know. So Brandy, yes, Brandy is saying yes. Well, that's wonderful. We hope a few more of you will chime in. There we go.
Yeah, I know Jeff has done something.
No, there you go. Good. Okay. Clara's she's ramping up, right? Okay, so with that, right, so let us introduce ourselves, right? So I'm Carlos Chacon, the founder here at SQL Data Partners and host of the SQL Data Partners podcast. And so we're excited to be here with you to continue this conversation. And I'm super happy to have my co-host, my cohort for today's session, Mr. Brian Combs.
Hi guys, everybody, welcome. And I'm a long-time database developer in multiple databases, focusing mostly SQL Server for the past 10 plus years. So I'm happy to provide some of my knowledge to you guys today.
So with that, we're gonna jump right into the gooey goodness.
Okay. Let me share my screen here. Bear with me 1 second. Yes, I copy I bring my AirMeet screen over to my other page. It just acted funny on me, but here I go.
So as we're waiting on that, right? So are there any other questions? And it's okay to ask a question that we already have covered. But if there are things that are on your mind, or you're like, you know what, I'd really like to know how to do this, let us know, and we'll try to get those into the mix there.
Okay, so everybody should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah, and we should mention, and I'm going to get that URL, and actually maybe Amanda, could you help us? The download link. So should you want to follow along with the queries that we're using here, we've written a little database to help you along there. Those files are downloadable. They're free, right? You can open them up and install them on your environment, and and of course the video will be made available later. So you're welcome to follow along again, or use that and kind of pick at it and find out what works for you. So we'll make that link available here in the chat shortly.
And just to mention, the database that we're using, along with a lot of the examples, come from a book, 0 to SQL in 20 Lessons, that Carlos authored, and it's a good read, really good for beginner users. So I would recommend it. Jumping into our demo, I just wanted to review a little bit of what we discussed in our last session. So I'm going to just talk about the simple select statement. And if you all remember, the basic format of a select is you select the columns that you want from the table that you want to pull it from, and then you can join two other tables if need to. And then you'll have a where clause which says I want these specific rows, and then we'll I don't remember how deep we got into the grouping, the aggregates last time, but you can also aggregate data such as using the sum function in your query, and then you would group by, let's say we talked about last time owners having multiple dogs, or something to that extent, where you could group by your owner and we can count the number of dogs that they had. So anyway, let's real briefly just talk about our simple select star, which means select all columns from our table. So that gives us all of our dog records. And so you refer to each just like you would in a spreadsheet. You know, the top labels are your column labels, and then each row is an individual record. So that's about as simple as you can get. And then we talked about just some simple joins. So if I wanted to join pet owner to the dog, just to find out who the dog table actually contains the owner identifier, but if we want to know who the actual name of that owner is, we would have to join to the pet owner table. And in this case, we're actually joining from pet owner to dog. And just to note, when you do an inner join, it doesn't really matter which table goes first. In this one, we're saying from pet owner and we're joining the dog. But since it's an inner join, it would be the same results either way. So in this case, we're getting all pet owners and the dogs that they own. So you might see the same owner in here twice. And if you go down to row 10 here, you'll see that we have David Leal. He has multiple dogs. So he has two different dogs here, Marmaduke and Ace. So that's just one example of how to do an inner join. Now we can also join to multiple tables. So in this case, we can join the dog and the cat. Now in this example, you're only going to get, since we're doing an inner join to both dog and cats, you're only going to get the pet owners that have both a dog and a cat. So in our previous example, I should have mentioned that did not show all the pet owners. That only showed pet owners that had a cat. So if a pet owner did not have a cat, you aren't going to see it there. I failed to mention that. So in this case, you're only going to get pet owners that have both cats and dogs. And you can see the results there. And every one of these owners is going to have both a dog. So here's the name of the dog and name of cat. So every one of these records is going to have both. Now, if we wanted to get owners that had dogs or cats, or even no pets, we change to a left outer join. So in this case, we want all pet owners, and we want to know if they have dogs, and also if they have a cat as well. But we want to see all owners. So in this case, we do a left outer join to dog and cat. And remember, we're joining on the dog owner identifier equals the pet owner identifier, and same thing with cat. So that's our key field that we want to join on here. And in this case, I selected only specific columns that we wanted to see. That way we don't see all the minutia that we're not really concerned about. So in this case, we get owners. Let's see, so if you look at line 1, that owner has a dog and also has a cat. If you look at line number 2 here, owner identifier 3, that owner has a dog, but the null values mean that in the cat table, our join to cat returned no records. So it returns a null value, or basically the absence of of a record. Now if somewhere in here we probably have a pet. Let me browse down here real quick. I know we've got some pets. Here we go. So here, this line I highlighted right here, you have an owner that has neither a dog or a cat. So we've got an owner in our owner table, but currently doesn't own any pets in our database. So that's an example of using a left outer join. And somehow I scrolled down here. Let me get back to where I was. That's the difference between an inner join and an outer join. And we talked about right outer join last time, but primarily you normally use left outer join. Just it's the way that you format your code. But right outer join is the same. It just means that the second table in your join is going to be your primary. So when we say from pet owner and we join the dog, if I said right outer join, it's actually going to pull all the dog records and the pet owner records that follow. But most of the time, your coders are going to put your primary table that you want all of the records from, or at least all of the records that exist in the secondary table. You're going to put that first, and then you normally do a left outer join. So just wanted to throw that out there. You don't use right outer join very often. Now there are.
I was going to say I think I can count on one finger the number of times I've had to use a right outer join.
Right, and I don't want to get here my last example. I just wanted to show an example of how you can use subqueries. And we talked about this, I think, just briefly in the previous session. But what I'm showing here is I'm pulling from the pet owner, but instead of doing a join, and this is probably not a really good example, but it shows you the syntax of how you could do this. So if I'm only pulling from the pet owner, but then I want to select how many dogs that owner has and how many cats that owner has, I could do subqueries to pull in that count. So in this example, I'm counting the number of dogs where the owner identifier, which is the owner identifier in your subquery identified by the parentheses here, equals the pet owner identifier. Now the pet owner identifier is actually coming from your primary table outside of your subquery. So in this case, it's basically saying whatever row I'm on, I want to count the number of dogs that pet owner has, and the same thing with the cats here. So I can run that really quick here. And you can see that gives us a list of all owners, and it tells us how many dogs and how many cats each user has. So that was just a real brief review on the select statement. And there's a whole lot more as you get into it. But as far as this, the scope of this session, just wanted you to be up to date on that before we start getting into the actual updates. So I'm going to jump over and start doing some updates to our data, because the whole purpose of your database is to update your data and make sure that your data is current, so that you can do your financial reporting, do your production. Basically it drives everything. So first off, let's get a list of our owners. And as you can see, this is the same list as we just had. And I don't really want to get political, so I've got Donald Trump and Joe Biden in here. So I'm going to give those guys a different name. And plus they're lying about their age anyway, because they're definitely not 42 and 43. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to update the pet owner's name to Aragorn and Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings. Those are good guys there. So
we talk about syntax, right? And so syntax being the rules, yes, right, that you have to follow. So yes, you'll notice that we've changed here from select from right? Here we've got update and then set,
Right.
right?
Now,
As the new keywords, and they change their, they're pink and blue, respectively.
right. So yeah, our keywords are update. So you're updating the table that you want to update. You're setting the column that you want to update to whatever the new value is, and you're using the same. The where clause is the same as your select, doing your select statement. And one thing I wanted to identify to point out here is that you generally would like to use the primary key if you can when you're doing an update statement, because that way you know you're only going to update that specific record. Because if I said,
this is where we need to give our Spider-Man, right? Our Spider-Man speech, right? With much privilege comes much responsibility.
right,
Right? We're starting to talk about changing records.
That's right.
And that can be dangerous, right? So
for example, if I wanted to, well, I have some good examples below, so let's just follow along. And the other thing is, when you look at our pet owners here, you can see it's in I was ordering by owner name, but right off the top, you see that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are our first two entries. And you can see why, because they have a leading space at the beginning of their name. So somehow whoever entered that put a space before they entered their name. A lot of times the database will take care of trimming that for you, but in this case it did not. So that's why those two are showing at the very top and not in alphabetical order. So in this case, I see that our Joe Biden is 240. So I want to update Joe Biden. I'm going to call him Aragorn. So I update him. And it will give you a message back that the one row was affected. That's generally a good thing. And while I'm at it, I'm going to update Donald Trump, who was 337 to Samwise Gamgee. And that one was successful. So now if we go up and run our select statement, order by owner name again, you can see that our owners are actually sorted correctly because I removed that leading space. Not only did I rename them, I removed the leading space when we renamed those. So that's a very simple update statement. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to find out who Alice Wonderland. We want to see what cats Alice Wonderland owns. And we can see Alice owns two cats. And we're getting the owner IDs for all of Alice. Okay, so I want to see if I said something to the extent of Alice Wonderland. If I wanted to, this got entered to Alice Wonderland. Let me start from scratch here. Somebody entered these cats to Alice Wonderland, but they actually wanted to go to Alice Cooper. They should have went to Alice Cooper. So we need to go back in and update these records so that they're actually showing the correct owner, the owner. So I'm going to go back to my select statement, and you're almost every time you're going to update data, you're going to do a select statement first, and you're going to see what records should be getting updated. You're going to get your where clause straight with your select statement before you ever even think about doing your update statement first. So in this case, we know that those cats that Alice Wonderland shows actually were meant to be for Alice Cooper, just the data entry clerk picked the wrong owner. So in this case, we know that Alice Cooper is owner identifier 89, and we know Alice Wonderland is owner identifier 328. So I just want to set both of those cats. I want to update those and change the owner identifier to Alice Cooper for any cat that Alice Wonderland has. And what did I do wrong here? Update cat set owner. Let's go back to my select statement here. So we want to set owner identifier equals 89, where owner identifier was 328. And let's see what I did incorrectly here. Expression of, I didn't copy all that. I must have ran that twice because now now they are both showing under, well, let's go back here and we'll just say Alice. We're going to look at all Alice's now. I think what I did is I accidentally hit the execute button twice. So the second time it showed that.
Thank you, Brian, for showing us the perils of updating.
Right, exactly. So now you can see that these two cats are actually owned by Alice Cooper. So obviously I hit it twice. So anyway, this command right here updated the cats and set them to Alice Cooper. And now if I do this, like I just did with the other command, it shows you that they are there. And now we find out that the same data collection clerk, I don't know, we might need to get rid of her. She added the dogs and she sent them to Alice Cooper, but they really were meant to go to Alice Wonderland. Somehow she got confused and she got them separated. So we have one dog that Alice Cooper owns. And in this example, I'm going to show this with aliases. So remember, you update the table you want to update. You set the columns that you want to set equal to the desired value. And then in our first example, we didn't have a from clause. So remember that, because update cat is your table. But in this example, I'm using a from clause and I'm actually joining to the pet owner. So I'm showing you an example of how you can update this using an alias and also you doing a join, because you can't update dog and then come down here and say inner join without doing a from dog. So in this case, we're saying we're joining dog and pet owner where the owner name equals Alice Cooper. We're going to update D, and it's using the alias from down here. We talked about aliases last time, and it's just a way of shortening the name for a table so that you don't have to type it all out. We could have said update dog up here also, but generally when you get more into this, you almost always set an alias for the tables. So let's run this guy real quick. So this time we do have the one row affected. And if I go back up here, you'll see that Alice Cooper no longer has a dog. Now if I switch that to Alice Wonderland, that dog that Alice Cooper had is now owned by Alice Wonderland. So just wanted to show you a little more complex version of the update. So I use this a whole lot, this format right here. So if you have any questions, throw them out there and we can come back and talk more about it. So
yeah, I guess let's just go ahead and ask that, right? Any questions there in terms of, right, how you go about deciding what to maybe not deciding what to update, but how you'd go about updating a column, right? So Brian showed one column, two column, multiple columns, and it also showed doing join. So any other questions or thoughts there?
And also in this last example I did, I said where the owner name equals Alice Cooper. So if I only wanted to, in this case, there was only one dog, but let's say that Alice Cooper had 3 dogs and one of them, he sold one dog to Alice Cooper. You would not want to do an update saying where owner name equals Alice Cooper, because it would change all 3 records over to whatever you have in your set statement. So that's when you have to be really careful. If you do you want to change all records that meet your where clause, or are you just looking for one specific record that you want to update? So do we have any questions? You can click.
Looks like we're clear there.
Okay. I changed my font to 18, so is that big enough for everybody to see? I know that there was somebody that was having problems seeing it earlier.
Yeah, I think we're getting some thumbs up. So it looks like we're
okay. Now, this is a little bit more advanced topic, but I wanted to cover this because it's something that I found is very, very useful. But there are
save your bacon.
Yeah, there's some catches to it that you also have to be aware of. So let's just follow through the example, and then we'll come back and talk about all the gotchas in this. So in this example, we're going to say that there's a dog named Pongo, and Aragorn's going to gift this over to Sam. Aragorn's going out on a big trip, and he just gives his dog to Sam. So let's find out who Aragorn and Samwise Gamgee. So I'm actually showing both of those owners and whatever dogs they might own. So Aragorn has a dog named Pongo, and so in this example, we're gonna give that over to Samwise Gamgee. So before I do anything, I'm introducing this begin transaction. So let me run this, execute. Once I ran that, I can go back here and run the select statement, and the transaction is not yet committed yet. So, but if I'm querying from my session that I just ran that I'm currently have the open transaction on, it'll show me the updates. So what did I just say? I said update. Did I run that? Hold on one second again. Where owner identifier equals 328. That's wrong. So that was incorrect. So let me roll this guy back because I had my syntax of I had my where clause incorrect. I had the wrong owner ID. So
and this is in essence, right? So this is showing,
right,
the idea. This is like the redo, the undo option.
Right.
Right?
I did that on purpose.
Yeah.
So the begin transaction always ends in a commit or a rollback. Rollback just takes you back to where you were before you ran this transaction, before you executed this code. Commit actually takes the code you just ran and it commits it. So it actually commits the transaction. So in this case, I just rolled it back. So we should be back to where we were. Now I want to do the transaction again, and all things going well, we should see that Pongo is now owned by Samwise Gamgee. But yeah, go ahead.
So Brian mentioned he was able to run this because he has a session and he's able to run it. If I'm on my computer and I try to run that same select statement, I'm not going to get results. I'm going to get a spinning.
Right. In fact, if I was to even just go to a different tab here,
right,
you're going to see something very interesting here. I already hit execute. You can see it's executing. And this is one of the gotchas of using a transaction. Since I'm not in the same session, the query doesn't run, and you can see it's just spinning. It's not, and the reason is if we were to go look at the blocks or the locks on the table, you're going to see that I have a lock on the table right now because of that transaction. So because I didn't hit commit yet, I basically I'm holding up anybody else from touching that data. So we know it's right. So now I want to commit it. Now, if I go over here to where I just created, just ran the query in the other session, you see that it's updated now. So now the data is committed. I no longer have a lock on that record. And that's one of the big gotchas. If you ever run a begin transaction and you don't commit or roll it back, you can cause problems. But what it does save you is if I was to do something like this, begin transaction, update dog, set owner identifier equals 337, and I hit execute. And I forgot to copy in the where clause. I just updated 247 rows. Whoops. We just have a so without that begin transaction, I have a problem now. I'm going to have to somehow go to my backup, find some backup data, and try to try to correct that data that I just royally messed up. So since I'm in the same session again, I can query, and you can see that every dog now has a owner of Samwise Gamgee. And the reason that Aragorn's showing there as the first line is because I'm using pet owner as my primary table. You can see he actually does not own any dogs. He's got null values. So every other dog in our system is owned by Samwise Gamgee. Fortunately, I did use the begin transaction. So now I can just go back to my rollback and highlight rollback and execute that and rerun our select statement. And now you can see that there's only one dog owned by Samwise Gamgee. So that's where that can really save you. So two things. Well, first, you have to be very, very careful whenever you're updating data. Make sure that you do your select statement. Make sure you have your where clause correct, that you're returning the records that you want to update. That's primary. That's your main, you have to be very, very careful with that. And then second, you can use begin transaction as needed. And transactions are used a whole lot in programming code where we might be doing multiple things at the same time, maybe updating 3 different tables with, with relative data, data that's all relative to the same primary record, I guess I would say. And you want to make sure all 3 of those tables get updated. And if at anywhere one of them is unsuccessful, you might want to roll it back. So that's where begin transaction and commit and rollback is used a whole lot in coding. But this is just a very simple example of how when you're doing an update, and especially if you're updating a production database, it can come in very, might save your neck at some point.
Sure. Now, Brian, we do have a question, right? So
Yep.
Kimberly asks, what if 2 users attempt to update the same table with begin transaction without a commit? What happens to the second user's update statement? So great question.
That's a great question. Here, let's see what would happen here. Let's just do it real quick.
Yeah, so I guess should I say? I guess I won't steal your suspense then, right? There we go.
Well, go ahead. I believe that my belief is the second person that tries to run is probably not going to be able to run the transaction.
Yeah, so just like the select statement, the second insert is going to have to wait for the first.
Right. That's exactly what's going to happen. So
you're basically creating stacking. So even like the example we showed was a select. It could have been an update, and it still had just spun and spun and spun because it was waiting on that first one to finish.
Right. So normally you don't want to spend a lot of time, especially if you're on your production database. You want to run the update, do your select statement real quick, make sure the data is good, and then commit it right away or roll it back. Either way, because you will hold up somebody else from being able to update anything. I believe it's up anything in that table, even Correct. If it's a record. Okay, so
does that help, Kimberly? Well, let us know.
Okay. My next example is just going to give you an example of of foreign keys. We didn't really talk a whole lot about that, and Carlos, you might want to just help out with here. But I just wanted to let you know that when you're updating records, you have to be cognizant of your primary keys and your foreign keys, and that's how your tables relate to each other. So if you try to, and I guess the best way to really explain this is to show you my example here. So let's look at our dogs that have that was from the previous example. So let's look at just all dogs here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to update my dog, and I'm going to set the owner identifier equal to 999, where the dog identifier equals 500. Now, I will tell you that 999, an owner of 999, does not exist in the pet owner table. So what do you guys think will happen? Does anybody have a good guess as to what's going to happen? Because the owner identifier is the primary key in the pet owner table and is the foreign key in the dog table. So am I saying that correctly, Carlos?
Yeah. I mean, so
Okay.
yeah, you've got a record that doesn't exist in the owner table that you want to create a relationship with in the dog table.
Right. And even though I'm only updating the dog table, here we'll see what happens here. And we get an error back. And let me raise this up a little bit here. And it tells us the update statement conflicted with the foreign key constraint, and it occurred on the table pet owner. So even I'm not even touching pet owner here, but because of that relationship between the dog owner identifier and the pet owner identifier, you cannot insert an invalid identifier, invalid number there. So 999 is not valid. So it stops you in your tracks and says, hey, you can't do that unless you first have a pet owner with an identifier of 999.
Yeah, and it's you use the word invalid. I I think I would use the word exists or
Right.
available, right? So the record has to be created there.
Right. Correct. So now that if I came back and I said, okay, well, I actually had 999 and it shouldn't have been 999, and I want to set it to 337, which we know is an owner that exists, then we get the example there of, let's see, dog identifier is 500, and we changed the owner identifier to 337. So you can see that our change was successful. So just what I wanted to show there is that you just have to be cognizant of the fact that if you have foreign key relationships, that whatever you're setting your record to has to exist in the table that you have the relationship with. So that's really the brief update commands. And I also wanted to touch on inserts, because you can't update data unless you first have it in your database. So we have to insert it. So I'm very quickly just gonna jump over here and since
And
we're already,
Alan, this is where we're going to come back. Just going to circle back to your question from earlier. And are you running SQL Server 2019 by chance, Brian? We didn't really talk about it. You are?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. Then we're gonna try something.
Okay. Is it something I need to do, or just
Yeah, you will. Go ahead, and we'll once you're done explaining, we're gonna try to prove an error. So
okay. So the first thing I'm gonna do is well, let's talk about the syntax first. So you want the proper syntax is you insert into a table. So in this example that I'm showing you here, it's dog. There's multiple ways to provide the values, and I'm going to show you as we go down this list. This is probably not my preferred way, but it was just a way to provide an example here. Since I'm not actually showing you all the columns that I want to insert into, you have to insert into all of the columns, excluding your primary key. That is your oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head, Carlos, but the sequential value key.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah. So,
You asked
when
me
you
enough.
when you set a primary key, it's your identity
Column. There you
your
go.
identity column where it sequentially assigns that automatically. You can't update or you can't insert into an identity column unless actually you can, but for the purpose of this, yeah,
That's not the intro. That's not the intro
right.
course.
In the scope of this, you can't insert into an identity column.
And
So
so,
basically, you would just skip that column when you're doing your insert. So
since you bring that up, though, let's go ahead and can you open up Object Explorer and let's show dog again? Let's just so they can kind of compare. I know that's kind of very small, but it might be helpful to just see if you expand dog and then columns. Yeah.
so yeah, I was going to say dog identifier is your primary key. It's an integer. Now, when you're looking at this, it doesn't really tell you that it's an identity field.
That's right.
You have to go into either you can actually hit modify here, or you can go up to dog and you can hit right click it and hit design, and that'll show you in the design view all of your columns, what data type it is, and whether it can accept a null value or not. But in order to actually know if it's an identity record, you have to highlight the actual row that you're looking at, and then you go down under the column properties, and down here under identity specification, which is about halfway down, it's highlighted in blue now, and you can see that is an identity, yes. So that means I don't want to insert into that table. The increment is 1, and the identity seed is 500. So what that's telling me is that whoever set this table up said, I wanted at this point I think our data doesn't really correspond to this, but if this was the way it was set up initially, our first record should have been 500, and then from there it would be 501, 502, 503, and so forth. It would increment by 1 with each record.
Yep.
So that's how you know if well, more than likely you're going to try to run it and you're going to get an error if you try to insert into that column, and it's going to tell you, and you can't insert into an identity field. So anything else there, Carlos? As far as looking at
so another way to do that. So the one thing that I dislike about that design view is now you're changing it, and it's possible you could change your table, right? Which is always gives me the willies. So normally I'm going to right click script table as, and then do create to, and then I can read that. It's going to show me, what it looks like. And here in the create table function, right, I can see, hey, dog identifier there's that identity.
It's actually a lot easier to see here also. So that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because right there it sticks out like a sore thumb, identity. And now you may not know that 500 is your increment seed or your seed, and 1 is your increment value. But that's what that is. So good point. Yeah, that's a much better way to look at it. Let's get out of there and let's go back over to our inserts. So let me insert this. I'm inserting a wiener dog named Gollum. And my insert statement conflicted with a foreign key constraint with pet owner and the owner identifier. And the reason is is that you have to insert the pet owner first. So I intentionally gave you in the same example as when we were using the update. Basically what happens is that I've got a new pet owner and I've got a new dog. I can't insert the dog first. I have to insert the pet owner first because that pet owner has to exist before we can insert the dog that's assigned to that actual pet owner. So here here's another example of the insert. So we're inserting into pet owner. We're going to insert the owner identifier, owner name, owner age, and owner gender. So in this case, I'm actually specifying the columns that I'm inserting into. Now keep in mind, if you don't include a column that does not allow null values, you'll also get an error. So so for example, I forget, let's look real quick if we have any other. So here, breed of dog, color of dog is not null. So if I was to not insert the color of the dog, we're going to get an error. All these other ones that do say null, so months with owner, I could actually skip it and it's not going to yell at me. So just wanted to update. So in this case, I'm inserting into pet owner and I'm inserting Frodo Baggins. So the key here is when you set your, I don't think I've really got into this much in the first example. So we're inserting into these that table, these columns, the values is what we want to insert. And these have to match up with in the same order as your columns up here. So 357 is the owner identifier. Frodo Baggins is owner name. If you don't have those in the same order, you're either going to get an error or you're going to have data that's corrupted or data that's inaccurate. Let's say that. So
well, the SQL Server is going to assume that's the order you want.
Right.
Now they can be different from your table order, right?
Right.
He could mix and match that order any way he wanted to. He just needs to make sure that when he lists the data in the values section that it matches.
That is correct. I could, this part up here I can put in any order I want, but I just have to make sure that my values align in the correct order with those. So for example, if I inserted Frodo Baggins into another, and I had it out of order, and I inserted it into, I don't know, some other text type of field, another varchar field, it would insert, but it wouldn't be in the right place. So you could also cause problems that way. So we inserted. I don't remember if I actually inserted that guy. Yes, I tried to, right? No, I didn't do this guy. I inserted the dog. Oh, this is exactly what we were talking about. So I'm giving you an example of where I'm trying to insert the identity column. So what we just spent time talking about, I was actually doing here. So I cannot, since the owner identifier is the identity field, I cannot insert that. And that was just an example to show you what we were talking about. So now if I take that out, the rows affected and my owner identifier was just going to get the next sequential ID number from the database. And right here, remove ID field, insert into pet owner.
All right. That's what you did above. You just, instead of.
Oh yeah, that's what I just did. Okay. Now the get owner ID and insert dog. So now we want to see all the dogs that Frodo owns, which should only be the one dog that we just inserted. And there we go. So let's see what not naming fields directly. That's we already talked about making sure the values are in the right order. So I think this is going back to the example where I don't specify the tables. And I want to give I have to provide every value of every column other than the identity column in order. So generally, I don't find this to be good practice. I think doing this is much easier to read and it's much more specific, so less room for error. But SQL does allow you to skip assigning the individual columns or specifying the individual columns. But in that case, you have to insert in the same order that these columns are in the database. So when you look at dog over here, since we already know that dog identifier was a identity field, you would skip that, but every one of these after that would have to be in the correct order. and you have to have a value for each one. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yep. So now our next insert example, and this is this is just an example of how you can use a select statement in an insert. So we just insert a dog, and now Frodo Baggins comes back to us and says, "Oh, you guys put this in dog, but Gollum's really a cat." So we already have almost all the information that we needed.
You'll forgive me, Brian. Can we before we jump into there, can we actually show Alan? So Alan's question was, hey, what are the new SQL Server 2019 features for beginners? And that's a tough one, but I'm not sure it's a feature as much as it is as a troubleshoot helper.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say for example, in our case, we want to insert a dog here. How wide? What is the data length for our dog column?
For
The dog name of dog. 40.
40.
Okay. So do me a favor and make that column so that in your insert, so wiener dog, just put a whole bunch of spaces after that. And let's make sure we make that longer than 40.
Okay.
Does that look long? Put a few more in there. Let's just make sure.
Let's go way out there. That's got to be more than 40.
That's right. So now if we were to do that insert, let's run that again. Previously, that's funny.
And previously you would, now here, let's.
Oh, you know what? We have, that's breed of dog.
This is a chart. It's a char column, not a var char.
Still.
And what about, let's just.
It actually should be the last one, right? Because we don't have it specified. So here we are trying to show this, and we're
options SQL Server 2019. I just wanted to make sure that I was truly. I didn't have it on.
No. I think we have our columns mixed up. But still, we should be. So breed of dog is only 30. So why is that allowing us to insert?
Let's jump
and
up
perhaps this, that seems odd. It should still give us an error.
So we have.
So what I was trying to show was previously it would error out and just say, hey, you get some generic. That is hilarious. You get a generic message about truncation. Well, in 2019, and maybe there's a setting. 2019, what I was anticipating getting was an error saying, hey, this is the column that I am complaining about.
Right.
I did not anticipate it actually inserting. Now I'm curious if you just do that, and then let's take a peek.
There we go. So it was automatically trimming the spaces for us.
Ta-da! There we go. So this is the update in 2019. It's going to give you the value that it is complaining about.
Right. So it's telling us the column is owner name.
Right. In previous versions, all you would get is that string or binary would be truncated in, that's it.
Right.
So that's the enhancement from a 2019 perspective.
Right. And I'm sure there is a whole lot of other little enhancements like that we probably don't know right off the top of our head, but that's a good one there, because I've chased my tail quite a few times trying to figure out which column it was. So back to my example here, or my other example. And what I'm showing here is that I inserted Gollum into the dog table, but then I inserted him into the Yes, into the dog, and then they told us that he's really a cat. I'm actually going to have an issue here now because I have multiple columns in there, but that's okay. We're not going to worry about that. But the whole purpose of this insert is it's the same format at the top, insert into cat, and then the name of all the columns that we want to insert into. But in this case, I'm actually selecting from another table in this case, and pulling in the data from that. So if I run this select statement right here, I'm going to, whoops, where dog identifier equals 751. So we need to change that.
I'm not actually sure you got the column inserted, Brian.
I may not have. Let's see. Well, there's the dog, but the dog identifier is 748. I was using, this is from a previous example. So anyway, if I run this query, there's my dog name column. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take this data, instead of specifically specifying each one of these fields, I can pull this dynamically from another database table. And this is probably not a good real life example, but it gives you an example of how to do this. So if we want to
the flexibility, right?
Right. So we're going to insert into, but then for the actual values, and notice that I don't type values in this case, since I'm using a select statement, you don't put values in front of select. And so I'm inserting into those tables and I'm using a select statement. And now if I go look at my cat table, there's Gollum. So basically I take the same information that was in the dog table, besides the breed of the cat, which I just hard coded, got copied into the cat. So that's some very brief, simple insert.
So a good example when you may run into that is, let's say you're getting a file from a third party, right? And so somebody else loads it into a table for you, and then you need to move that information somewhere, right? This, what Brian just showed you, is a great example of that. I have data in my table somewhere, but I need to put it someplace else. And
yeah, you might have another table of
1,000 records. Or
1,000 records, and you definitely don't want to have to specify each value. You want to be able to dynamically pull that. So that's what this is very beneficial for.
Yep. I think that's going to do it for today's session. Thanks so much. We do have one more session in store, and that is going to be, we're going to be going over, more than tables, talking a little bit about views, and then getting into some of the advanced features, dates, and things like that, right? So awesome. Okay, well, thanks everybody for filling out the poll. Thanks, Brian, for being here again today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks, everyone. Hope it was beneficial.
Have a great 2 weeks.
Bye, guys.
SQL Data Partners.